Healthcare reform, one of the hottest issues heading into this year's presidential election. Maria Bartiromo went to the J.P. Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco for an exclusive interview with Mylan CEO Heather Bresch to get her take on high drug prices and everything related to the 2016 election, plus its impact on the healthcare industry as a whole.
Do you worry that if we see the White House change hands to perhaps Secretary Clinton, for example, that we're going to see real pressure on drug prices? We know what happened last year in terms of her talking about, keeping drug prices affordable after we saw what Martin Shkreli did with his HIV/AIDS drug.
I hope not, because I don't think the answer is price controls. I think when you look at the macro environment, there's no question the United States has subsidized the rest of the world with drug innovation, and it's been because of our capital markets that have allowed us to do that. When you look and step back, we're growing, the entire pharmaceutical market grew a little over 10% this year, as it did in 2014. However, yes, you have these outliers that I think get the PR headlines. When you look overall, generics were 90% of the volume, 3% price increase overall. So I think that there are certainly outliers that are grabbing great headlines, but it's not the answer. And I think that remaining competitive, having FDA make sure they get as many people into the marketplace at the same high quality level is what will continue to make that supply and demand, or equalize the supply and demand.
I mean, you would think that regulators would want to have as favorable an environment for the generics as possible.
Right.
They're the ones that are actually making sure that the free market works. And that's exactly what happened after, by the way, Shkreli raised his price. Another company comes in and says, guess what?
Yeah.
We could make a generic for $1 a pill.
So what you see when you have an outlier as that product is that there's a pretty quick market correction. And so, it's very unusual or an anomaly to not have that course corrected very quickly. Just as you said, suppliers come out. There's pressure put on the FDA to make sure there's not just one supplier in the market if something has lost its patent protection. So I think overall the U.S. market works. I think the pharmaceuticals are 10 to 12% of the overall healthcare dollar. So if you look at $300 billion out of a $3 trillion cost, what I hope that we pay more attention to is our entire healthcare process, because I've said before, we have focused more on a sick care system than a healthcare system, and we need to be focusing on the entire $3 trillion and how to be much more proactive and preventative with healthcare versus trying to just figure out how to contain costs.
It's absolutely true, but at the same time, when you think about some of the needs in the world today, I mean, for example, if we were to see an Alzheimer's drug, I don't know how much that drug could go for.
Right.
That's the bottom line. You need investors to be able to want to invest in R&D so that you could actually find some of these breakthroughs.
And it delivers long-term value, because you think of what the hospital, that $3 trillion cost comes from, again, us not paying enough attention or wanting to invest in the innovative preventative medicines that will make hospitals stay shorter or keep you out of the hospital altogether, or help some of these disease states that become debilitating to our society as we enter in this baby boomer generation and as our parents are getting older. So, we need to really step back and I think take a holistic picture of this. Unfortunately, in an election year, as you know, it's about headlines, and it's not always about the substance that's the right policy underneath it. And I hope at the end of the day, once we get through the election, whoever wins that White House will be able to have a very intelligent conversation about what the healthcare system should look like and the changes that we can continue to do to be one of the best in the world.
And one of those headlines has been tax reform, for sure. I mean, when you see American companies merging with overseas companies to get a better tax story for themselves, how big of a disadvantage is it when you see somebody like a Pfizer getting together with Allergan? I mean, I spoke with the head of Allergan the other day, who was telling me last year his effective tax rate was 4%. Yeah, the tax rate was 14%, but effectively it ended up being 4%. Compare that to 35% in America, and you can understand why major companies have got to figure out how to make their costs out of the business improvement.
No, it's significant. And what I don't understand is the conversation tends to continue to go to, let's handcuff companies to the U.S. versus let's make the U.S. a better place to do business. I can't get my head around that. So as long as our regulators, our senators, our presidential candidates want to talk about how can I just force a company to stay here versus what do I need to do to make our environment competitive. Not only the tax rate, the territorial system. We're one of the only developed countries in the world that want to tax you on everything that you make and do in the rest of the world. So not only can you not bring your cash back, you're at a disadvantage at your tax rate, everything from acquisitions and to just competing in the marketplace. And then aside from that, we're saying that we're going to tax you for everything you sell around the rest of the world. So, you know, it's unfortunately a draconian tax system, and that needs to be refined. And again, looking at the entire picture. You know, I think there's things that between Washington and Wall Street, all of these things could go to work together to incentivize longer-term behavior versus, again, driving to these short-term goals that unfortunately, you know, it becomes a feeding frenzy.
But obviously you're in the deal mode at this point, and you're going to be growing both from organic as well as through acquisition.
Absolutely. Very aggressive, and we're going to remain the acquirer.
Heather, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.